Ever wondered how prototypes are made? When ideas go from 2D sketches to 3D forms? Various materials, including floral foam, which I will be demonstrating with today, are used in this process. In this video, I'll be creating an abstracted form. When carved, floral foam creates quite a bit of dust, so make sure to wear a face mask to avoid breathing in fine particles and safety glasses to avoid eye irritation. The first thing you should do is protect your work surface with a towel. Unlike newspaper, the towel traps all the particles in its weave and prevents dust from spreading all over the place. Before you start any actual carving, draw your design or general outlines on your foam block. I'm using a sharpened color pencil to slightly indent the surface. I know I want a hole running through my form, so I'm going to draw these cross hatches as indication for reference later. I will also be drawing the same image mirrored on the opposite side of the block, which means I'll be drawing the same imagery in a horizontally flipped orientation. Try using up as much of the block as possible, going all the way to the edges and corners. Since this object is in the round, which means we'll see it from all sides, you'll want to have some type of indication mark on every single side. This way, you'll know exactly where to carve and how much to carve. I'll be using my loop tool for most of my carving. The rounded side is great for curves, and the square side is really great for cutting out precise edges. Identify what will be the positive space, and then identify what will be the negative space, which will all be shaved down. I recommend starting at the corners to carve away your negative space. It helps to make an outline along the positive space, then gradually trim away the excess. As you can see, the square side of my loop tool does a really great job at outlining alongside the positive space. It's always good to keep checking back and forth between your two sides so you don't accidentally carve away too much from one side. Now if you have two sides where the positive space doesn't really meet each other at the edges, just outline the positive space and we'll get to that later. Also, remember that with subtractive carving, once you carve away, there's no adding back. So make sure to do this carefully and take your time when you're carving away. When you've carved out alongside the majority of your positive space, really focusing on the corners, now you can smooth out textures. Floral foam is super soft, so you can easily do this by rubbing your fingers over the textures to smooth it out. And as you can see, the towel is doing a really great job at holding all of those particles of foam in place. Next, identify the main side of your block and slowly start carving away at the bigger negative spaces. You might cut a big chunk from one of your sides. This was the section from earlier where the positive spaces didn't connect at the edges. I'm going to start off by matching up these diagonal lines together. I'm taking my time to slowly carve away from both sides, flipping the block over to check that I don't overcarve on either side. I personally don't like using knives to cut out big chunks of my block, especially if I'm working small, because that way I lose some control over how much I'm carving. After you've carved and smoothed out along the negative space from your main side, it's time to move to a side view. So my two sides had ovals drawn to indicate negative space or a hole that will be running through my sculpture. Since I carved away a good chunk of the second side that the hole led to, I have two options. I can either carve the hole through to the original place it was supposed to lead to, or if I don't like the way that's going to look based off the way my form has changed, I can draw a new section and create a hole moving in a different direction. When you're carving a hole through a sculpture, it's always good to go back and forth from one side of the hole to the other so that your hole can open up and meet in the middle. This way, you're less likely to dig in the wrong direction. If you're not sure what direction to dig your hole into, you can look at your sculpture from a side view. Imagine the hole you want to create running through your sculpture. Now hold your tool pointed in that direction and carve. Keep going back and forth, carving from both sides, and eventually, the two holes will meet in the center and form a tunnel running through your sculpture. When you've successfully carved out this hole, you can use your fingers to smooth out the interior and figure out whether or not you need to make the hole bigger. If you have blockage, you can gently tap on the exterior of your form to loosen out any excess debris. If you want to carve out a section that's too flat, you can carve alongside the edges of your outline and round them out as you go. At the highest point of your curve, carve almost parallel to the block. As the curve starts to round out, hold your tool more on the perpendicular side compared to your initial flat surface. At just about any point, you can start drastically changing the shape of your form, but I usually wait to do this until after I've carved away all of the negative spaces from my initial outlines. For example, I originally didn't have any type of carving happening in this corner, but it was looking a little too plain, so I decided to add an indentation. Now, I'm going to work on more detailed carvings. Based off the lines that I drew in the positive space from my initial outlines, I'm going to create added layers. By carving away just a slight amount from my flat surface, I'm creating a relief. Now, a relief is a flat surface with three-dimensional elements, but you can have a relief on a flat section of an end-around form as well. I'll continue to add a second hole and smooth out my form before moving on to even further details. Using the corner of the square side of my loop tool, I can carve channels and grooves. Then I can use my pencil to make those channels even deeper and defined. These lines add a level of interest to our form that it initially didn't have, adding lines to a fairly simple surface without the use of paint or colorant. Turn your object around and look at it from all sides. Make sure it looks cohesive and add more lines if necessary. If you have a specific look, keep it consistent. But if you accidentally carve away too much or create an unwanted dent, work with the new dent you've created since you won't be able to add material back once you've carved it off. Run a brush through your grooves to get the excess dust out so you have a better idea of what you have carved. Then continue adding lines and details as needed until you think you're done. The last step is to clean up your workspace, and if you use the towel, you'll see that cleanup is super fast and easy. Floral foam truly is an ideal material to practice your subtractive carving. It's inexpensive, readily available, comes in all sizes, and doesn't require a whole bunch of fancy tools. With this material, the possibilities are endless. All you need is a little bit of planning, a little imagination, and you're set. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. And if there's something you'd like to see me make, leave a comment. Until next time, happy sculpting!